morning, everybody, and welcome to Carbon Smart Building Day. This will be one of the most important days of your entire life, and it just began. So thank you for being here. So for me, personally, I'll tell you, it was just a few years ago, I was the founding director of a global movement called the Charter for Compassion International. It was a movement founded by Karen Armstrong, endorsed by the Dalai Lama, and hundreds of cities around the world who said, through endorsing the charter, that they wanted to create a place of compassion where they lived. And the Dalai Lama, though, said to us, you know, compassion is not a feeling of empathy or pity for those less fortunate. No, compassion is practical action with measurable results to alleviate suffering and to create a world that works for everybody. And in our world, every single challenge that we face is driven by climate change. Violent conflict, famine, resource depletion, homelessness, disease, millions of refugees cascading around the world. So my driving question became, what are the structural imperatives in the system that we can leverage to help us drive toward solutions, toward health, toward a sustainable human community defined by our compassion instead of by our dysfunction? We all in this room know that the built environment is responsible for over 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. This means we cannot solve the problem of climate change without solving the problem of buildings. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to drive that number from 40 to 0. This is an astounding moment, a magical moment. 3 months ago, this conference did not exist, and yet here we are, 300 people from over 250 companies and NGOs drawn from across our industry. And today you'll hear from some extraordinary speakers, and they'll be saying some things worth hearing. But the change we're looking to create will not be made by a few experts spouting wisdom from a stage. Look around you. Please, look around you. These are the people who will create the change we need. You are the people history has been waiting for. And the most important thing you'll do today is meet the people who are sitting all around you. So in that spirit, I'd like to welcome to the stage Brenden Millstein, the CEO and the co-founder of Carbon Lighthouse, our title sponsor. Brenden, I want to make sure that I pronounce that correctly from now on. I promise I'll try. I'd like to kind of start off the conference by asking you a couple of questions that will help us kind of frame the day for us. So from your perspective and from Carbon Lighthouse's perspective, I guess, what's the purpose of this day? Why are we all here from your perspective?
Actually, check. I think you just said it very well. So in the US, 40% of emissions come from commercial and industrial buildings. I'll add on residential to that is another 30%. So the built environment is by far the largest individual wedge, and even just C&I within it is the largest single source of emissions in the US. Globally, that number is not much different. Commercial and industrial buildings are responsible for about 30% of emissions internationally. So this is the thing to tackle. And the other thing I think you said that is right is it's not good enough to reduce those emissions by 20% or 50% or even 80%. We have to get to 0 emissions, and we don't have all that much time to do it. So that is why we are all here.
So we'll be talking a lot about collective action or collective impact today, and especially as we get to the end, we're going to be thinking about how do we carry this vision and this energy forward? How does it show up, I'd like to know, in the business plan for Carbon Lighthouse?
Yeah, absolutely. And anytime someone says energy, I have the pun in my head. But so collective action, I think that is the question, right? We have to take this massive source of emissions and get it to 0. So what is collective action? Collective action is getting a large number of disparate stakeholders to all pursue vigorously a common goal. So how on earth do we do that? In my experience, the easiest, fastest way to do this is to make it very profitable and very easy for everyone to act to chase that goal. And there is it's a long-standing narrative that environmentalism and capitalism cannot coexist. You can either have growth or you can protect the planet, but you can't do both. And our president actually ran part of his campaign on this and removed the US from the Paris Agreement on this narrative. And I'm very excited to say, in this case, the narrative is no longer true, and our president is just plain wrong on this one, which is great. So the financials of environmentalism have changed very dramatically quite recently in a way that is very helpful towards collective action. So the cost of solar power has come down 70% in the past 4 years alone. The cost of wind power has come down 60% in the past decade. The cost of batteries is plummeting and only just getting started. And it is now very profitable for companies to act to reduce and in some cases eliminate their emissions. So full disclosure, I'm from the Bay Area. It's very likely I would turn out to be an environmentalist. But it's not actually until my senior year of high school when I took a nuclear engineering class at UC Berkeley that I really fell in love with the idea of giving people money to stop climate change. And here in this nuclear engineering class was the first time I saw a way to use math to improve the lives of billions of people. And the financial incentives were completely aligned. We could just hand people money to do the right thing. So at Carbon Lighthouse, that's what we do. And in a fun bit of irony, we actually take our strategy book straight out of big oil and big gas. And we look at the world through the concept of reserves. So an oil reserve is what is the amount of money that's in the ground that you can get out of oil. And in the built environment, we have what we call the efficiency reserves, or the efficiency resource base. And this is the amount of wasted energy that can be turned into profit for landlords and occupants. And if we look around the US, we see that the resource base of wasted energy is $100 billion. So if you want to talk about collective action, giving people $100 billion is a really great way to get people to act. So Carbon Lighthouse has already started this. We've doubled revenue every 14 months for 8.5 years now. We've eliminated the emissions of 6 power plants. We have another 9 power plants under contract. But I'm really excited to say we are not alone. So we're in the Bay Area, so I'll call out some local firms who are here as well. Proterra manufactures electric buses. They make money solely by eliminating emissions caused by busing. Proterra, or I just said Proterra. Limebike makes bikes. They make money solely by eliminating emissions caused by cars. Impossible Foods is making money solely by eliminating emissions coming out of the agricultural and meat industry. So there are now these pretty large companies whose business models solely make them money based off of reducing emissions. And for Carbon Lighthouse, the resource base we're going after is $100 billion. So I think unchecked capitalism has led to plenty of problems in society, but right now it just may well be our salvation, since collective action across nations is very challenging, but the profit incentive is very powerful and the pot of money is enormous.
Right. Yeah. Great. So Brenden, over the last 2 weeks, I've been working together with Mike Hauer from your company and a team of another 10 or 12 people from many of the organizations that are here today to develop what we're calling the Carbon Smart Building Declaration, that tries to sum up what all this is about and what the movement intends and would like to provoke and incite. So from your perspective, what do you hope that this declaration that we're all considering and signing, hopefully, what do you hope it will actually ignite in the world?
Yeah, I hope it will serve as a focal point to ignite action. And there's a couple things that are very specific in the Carbon Smart Building Declaration. So the first is to commit to making all new construction net zero by 2030. And the second is to commit to making all existing buildings net zero by 2050. So from Carbon Lighthouse's perspective, we will commit to figuring out how to make all existing buildings net zero by 2030. So we're going to try and beat it by 2 decades.
Yeah.
All right.
I like that too.
But we don't actually have to. If we got to 0 emissions by 2050, that would be okay. So it is my hope that people will not just make commitments, but figure out the actual plans to get there, and that those plans will start action now.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Great. Thanks. Good job.